It is a far greater leap of faith to believe in the first two possibilities than it would be to believe in the final option. Welcome to the Ryan Holmes podcast, where we exist to encourage Christian thinking and Christian living. My name is Ryan Holmes, and I am your host. This is episode 4. You'll begin to see quickly that today's topic has absolutely nothing to do with baseball. So I apologize if I led anybody astray with the title. This week, we will be talking about the beginning of our universe. That's right, we're going back to the beginning. Here's what I think about the scientific evidence for the beginning of our universe. I think it points us to God. Imagine that. The Christian believes that God created everything. But seriously, what I want to do with this episode is discuss the scientific data and then draw a conclusion based on the data that we do have today. So, are you ready? Are you with me? Let's do this. First of all, today, I want to discuss, number one, the first and second law of thermodynamics. The first and second law of thermodynamics. The first law tells us that the amount of energy within our universe is constant. There is only a set amount of energy without the input of any further energy. The second law tells us that while the amount of energy within our universe stays the same, the amount of usable energy decreases as it's used up. Essentially, this tells us that our universe is running out of usable energy. This is also what's known as entropy. So things decay and degrade over time. Entropy is the degree of disorder within a system. As the amount of usable energy is consumed, the amount of unusable energy increases, and so does the amount of disorder or chaos. So basically, things tend to get more disorderly. So our universe is becoming more and more disorderly or chaotic as the amount of usable energy decreases. Once the usable energy is consumed, the universe will come to what will be a predicted heat death. Arthur Eddington, an English astronomer, physicist, and mathematician, had this to say of the second law. The law that entropy increases, the second law of thermodynamics, holds, I think, the supreme position among the laws of nature. If your theory is found to be against the second law of thermodynamics, I can give you no hope. There is nothing for it but to collapse in deepest humiliation. Unquote. If our universe began an infinitely long time ago, then it would have reached a state of absolute entropy or disorder by now. But here we are. There seems to still be some semblance of order and usable energy left, so this suggests that our universe could not have begun to exist an infinitely long time ago and is therefore finite. So our universe had a beginning. Number 2, the expansion of our universe. The expansion of our universe. Our universe is expanding. Astrology has shown us that our universe is expanding out in every direction from what appears to be one singular point. Based on the information, if we were to rewind the expansion process, we would see the universe collapse back to a singular point in time, so a singular starting point. This would suggest that our universe did indeed have a beginning. And what's interesting about the expansion rate is that it is actually increasing, meaning that the speed at which the universe is expanding is picking up the pace. Number 3, the background radiation echo. The background radiation echo, or the background radiation afterglow. So the background radiation echo is the radiation that was left over from the Big Bang explosion. This was something that scientists predicted would be found if the Big Bang were actually true and it had taken place because of the amount of matter and energy coming together in an instant. This background radiation was discovered in 1965 by Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson and confirmed what scientists had anticipated finding. In 1989, there is a space probe launched called COBE, or Cosmic Background Explorer, and it was launched and was able to measure the temperature ripples and variance in the cosmic background radiation. The ripples showed that the explosion and expansion of our universe was precisely tweaked to cause just enough matter to congregate to allow galaxy formation, but not enough to cause the universe to collapse back on itself. Robert Jastrow, an American astronomer and planetary physicist, had this to say: "No explanation other than the Big Bang has been found for the fireball radiation. The clincher, which has convinced almost the last doubting Thomas, is that the radiation discovered by Penzias and Wilson has exactly the pattern of wavelengths expected for the light and heat produced in a great explosion. Supporters of the steady-state theory have tried desperately to find an alternative explanation, but they have failed. At the present time, the Big Bang theory has no competitors." I want to make it very clear that the language of the Big Bang shouldn't worry us or scare us as believers. This is irrelevant to your position of old or young earth creationism. I'm not actually taking any position within this episode. Whether your position is old or young earth, either way, our universe had a beginning. That is the emphasis I'm trying to make, and that's where I'm trying to keep the focus. If God did speak our universe into existence in an instant, then you have all matter and energy coming together at one moment. All that matter and energy coming together, would that not create a Big Bang? So, these have been a few major lines of evidence that suggest to us that our universe did indeed have a beginning at some point in the remote past. At least to this point, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Doesn't seem so far-fetched. I would like to make one thing clear when we are talking about the beginning of our universe. We are talking about a universe coming into existence out of nothing, not a universe out of existing material. Stephen Hawking had this to say about our universe beginning. Quote, "Almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang," unquote. Even Richard Dawkins has affirmed this very point, and he's gone on to say, "Of course, it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. Of course, common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting to give rise to the universe at all. Something mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe," unquote. Time, space, and matter are interdependent. This is what Einstein's theory of general relativity showed. Time, space, and matter are correlative, meaning that you cannot have one without the others, and all three originated at the Big Bang. The law of causality tells us that everything that comes into being has a cause. So anything that has a beginning requires a cause of its beginning. So if our universe had a beginning, it stands to reason that something must have caused it to come into existence, because something cannot come from nothing, and something cannot cause itself to come into existence, because you see that it would have to exist before existing to cause it to come into existence. Based on the information that we do have, we can gain an understanding of what this first cause might be. So here's what we do know. Time, space, and matter all originated at the Big Bang. So the first cause of our universe could not be within time, it could not be within space, and it could not be made of material. What else could we expect of this cause? Obviously, something that could cause our universe to come into existence out of nothing would need to be extremely powerful, because if you haven't noticed, our universe is pretty big. In order to create a universe as vast, as intricate, and as complex as ours out of nothing, I'm sure would take a pretty big intellect. Finally, I would argue that this cause would have to be personal in order to choose to create or choose not to create. So this first cause would certainly need to be spaceless, outside of space, timeless, outside of time, and immaterial, but also extremely powerful, very intelligent, and personal. All of these being characteristics that we as Christians would attribute to God. If this is all true about the first cause, then, which I believe it is, it would only leave three worldviews on the table: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It eliminates the pantheistic religions, and we're left with the theistic religions. This isn't necessarily an argument for Christianity alone, but it gets us one step closer and gives us confident assurance as Christians in the validity of Genesis 1:1. Now, I'd like to shift gears into some possible objections and alternative theories that are common when discussing the evidence we just presented. Before we continue, I really appreciate you tuning in to this episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, would you please give it a 5-star rating on iTunes, leave us a review, or follow and subscribe on whatever listening platform you might be using to help boost the podcast's reach and visibility. If you wish to financially support the podcast, we've actually made a slight change. Please visit ryanholmespodcast.locals.com. Not only will you be supporting the podcast, but with Locals, you'll actually be joining a community of believers that have similar interests to you. And you'll receive early access to each episode each week, along with other perks that will be exclusive to our Locals community members. You can subscribe to our Locals community for just $5 per month. And if you're on YouTube, please like the video, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell. Thank you, and I appreciate all of your support. All right, back to the possible alternative theories and objections. So first of all, one alternative theory in explaining how our universe came to be is the multiple universe theory, or the multiverse. This theory suggests that there are an infinite number of universes out there. With there being an infinite number of universes, chances are there is at least one that happens to have the properties necessary to allow for life, and we happen to be living in that one universe. So, does it seem plausible? Well, I want to discuss why I don't think that this is an adequate explanation. First of all, there's absolutely no evidence for this theory. There isn't a single shred. It's a faith-based theory. Secondly, as far as what I can see, there's a problem with the understanding of what an infinite is. Something that is infinite has no beginning and no end. You cannot subtract from an infinite. You cannot add to an infinite. If you could add to an infinite number, then that number would not be infinite. So if our universe had a beginning, this means that it would be an addition to the number of already existing universes. But if our universe is an addition to the other universes, then there cannot be an infinite number of universes, because again, you cannot add to an infinite. Think about it this way. If we were to reverse that trend and start subtracting each additional universe, you would eventually come to a point of zero. Therefore, an infinite number of universes would not be possible. If there isn't an infinite number of universes, but there is a seemingly innumerable amount of universes coming into existence all the time, then the one who holds this position would not only have to explain how our universe came to be, but they would also have to explain how every other universe came into existence as well. This just compounds the problem and doesn't really provide any solution at all. But I would like to add one final thought. I would even contend that the discovery of other universes is an actual impossibility. In order to say that there are other universes, we would have to have the ability to go beyond the boundaries of our universe to know when our universe ends and another begins. Let me illustrate this. Picture a room filled with blown up balloons. The only way to know that there is a room full of blown up balloons is to be outside of the balloons. But if we were confined to the boundaries of one single balloon, we could say nothing more than what we know about that one balloon. So we could never determine if there were other balloons in the room. And it's the same situation with our universe. If we are limited to the confines of this universe, how could we then say anything about even one additional universe, let alone an infinite number of them? Next, number 2, the next possible alternative theory to our universe origins is the cosmic rebound theory. The cosmic rebound theory. This theory suggests that the universe has been expanding and contracting for an infinitely long time. In other words, the universe has been exploding and collapsing back in on itself over and over and over again. This helps avoid an absolute beginning. First of all, the most obvious issue with this theory is that there's no scientific evidence. This is also a faith-based theory. The universe seems to have exploded once from nothing, not repeatedly from existing materials. Second, there wouldn't be enough matter to pull everything back together. And we now know that the universe is expanding at a faster pace, so this makes an impending collapse even more improbable. And finally, this theory assumes that there would be no energy lost within from each expansion and contraction. So from each explosion and contraction. Remember, there's only a finite amount of usable energy in our universe. A universe banging repeatedly would eventually fizzle out. So if our universe has been expanding and contracting since eternity past, it would have fizzled out by now. The next point I would like to address is a typical objection raised against the argument for God being the cause of our universe. And this is what's known as the "Who Made God Objection." The "Who Made God Objection." A typical response is this: if everything needs a cause, then who caused God? Or who created God? Now, if we did have to explain who or what the cause of God is, that would still not remove the need to explain the cause of our universe. This seems to be a deflection from having to actually deal with the cause of our universe issue. It would be like finding an axe head in the middle of the desert and saying, I won't believe that there is an intelligent cause behind that axe head until you can explain to me the cause behind the intelligence. It doesn't really make much sense. But having to find or explain a cause for God isn't actually necessary. What this objection ultimately does is fail to understand the law of causality. The law of causality states that everything that has a beginning needs a cause. Everything that has a beginning or comes into existence needs a cause. The cause of our universe we are arguing for in this case did not have a beginning and therefore does not need a cause. Now, this is not a workaround or a cop-out answer, but think about it for a second. If at any point in history absolutely nothing existed, then nothing would exist today. Something cannot come from nothing. There has to be at least one thing that is eternal. Either the universe is eternal, which we have very good reason to believe this is not the case, or the cause of our universe is, in this case, God. Finally, I'd like to address one more objection. This one is called the God of the gaps theory. The God of the gaps fallacy. The accusation within this fallacy is that when we come to a point where our knowledge runs out or is limited, we attribute the phenomenon to God. So basically, wherever there is a gap in our knowledge, we insert God. Unfortunately for the skeptic, this is not the fallacy taking place in our argument, because we are drawing a conclusion based on the knowledge, the data, and the information that we do have. This is not a conclusion based on an absence of information, but from the presence of information. We are making an inference to what we believe to be the most reasonable explanation. And the irony here is that the ones engaging in a so-called gap fallacy are the skeptics or the atheists. They do not have an adequate natural explanation for the cause of our universe, and yet they believe that one day we will find one. But what is this belief rooted in? Faith. And actually, in the absence of information. It's a naturalism of the gap theory, if you will. And I want to be clear, Christians are not opposed to further exploration. We aren't. It's a theistic Christian faith that led people like Francis Bacon, Johannes Kepler, Louis Pasteur, Galileo Galilei, Robert Boyle, Gregor Mendel, Lord Kelvin, James Maxwell, and many more's interest in the sciences. Their faith led to their pursuit of understanding our world because they wanted to know God more and they wanted to understand his mind better. So we aren't opposed to further exploration, but there must come a point where you accept the information that we do have and draw a conclusion based on that information, even while pursuing more information. Christian, we do not need to fear the sciences. We don't. The study of natural theology is an amazing way of understanding God better. I mean, look at what Romans has to say. Romans chapter 1 and verse 19 through 20. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. So ask yourself today, is it more probable that our universe came into existence out of nothing? Is it more probable that our universe somehow caused itself to come into existence? Or is it more probable that there is an intelligent cause behind it all? I would suggest that it is a far greater leap of faith to believe in the first two possibilities than it would be to believe in the final option. All positions are faith-based positions due to our limited capacity for knowledge. No one was there at the beginning, but ask yourself which of these positions requires the greatest amount of faith. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have a question for me, thought, comment, maybe even a topic that you want me to discuss in a future episode, please send me an email to ryanholmespodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to visit ryanholmespodcast.locals.com to join our community. I appreciate any support. And if you're on the YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and ultimately please share this podcast and let's help encourage others to think about their faith and live it out. See you next week.